Perfect. We are now live on YouTube. So thank you all so much. I will now go ahead and present our guests for the session. We have Christine Lacayo and Susie Gamboa from Siembra Studios. Siembra Studios is a creative studio helping social impact brands transform their story through captivating visuals and storytelling, so they can continue to drive people to change, to positive change, while staying rooted in their values. This talk will focus on environmental communication using theory of color, fonts, inclusive design practices, and the main elements of design, brand, and storytelling. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I will hand it over to you so we can hear more from you.
Okay, thank you for presenting us. Let me let's see how I do this. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can see it now.
All right, perfect. Let me see, where's the present button? All right, so yeah, like Anna said, our presentation is focused on environmental communication using design and storytelling. And just to get an idea, actually, I can't even see the chat box. Oh, I could. I'm just curious to know how many of you all are familiar with design and storytelling in general. And you can just type in the chat box. Okay, awesome. So somewhat familiar, but not too much. Okay, so consider this your crash course. All right, so in today's agenda, we're gonna talk a little bit about Siembra Studios. Since Anna already introduced us, we'll just mention who we are, and then Christine will talk about storytelling for change. We'll have a small breakout session, and then we'll go into designing your message of change, and we'll also have a tool for you called Canva, and I can show you how to use that. So we'll have a little like interactive piece. All right, so let me go. Oh, wow. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so like Anna said, we're a creative studio for change makers and social impact brands. I'm Susie Gamboa, and I'm the creative director, designer at Siembra. And Christine is the, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. I'm the communications director and copywriter at Siembra, and I'm in Atlanta.
We'd love to know. And I'm in Austin. Sorry.
Yeah, Susie is in Austin, Texas, in Georgia. If everyone lets us know in the chat where they're coming from, we'd love to know where all you are based in.
Oh, Mexico. Awesome. There's a few of you from Mexico. Oh, sorry, Christine. I'm going to let you take it away. I think when I click, oh, India and New York. Wow, that's awesome.
Awesome. Great. A lot of great places across the world. Okay. Well, thank you, Anna, for your introduction. And thank you all for allowing us to present today and to be a part of your community here today. So as Susie mentioned, we're going to start off with storytelling. And in the storytelling session, I want to focus on these three main points here: the importance of storytelling. So a little bit about the origins and the background of storytelling, so you all can get a little bit about that. Using stories, how to use stories to power change. So we'll go into some of the 7 elements of that, and then developing your story of change. So I want to touch on the basic elements and the kind of like structure of a story, and then we'll have like a little breakout session. Anna will put you all into groups, and you'll actually get to practice and do a little exercise on developing your own story of change. So that'll kind of be the structure of this storytelling session. And I have here a quote by Robert McKee, who is an author, screenwriter, and the founder of a storytelling seminar called Storynomics for leaders and managers and marketers to learn how to use story in strategic management, brand management, and business development. So he's a great, really cool guy to look into and to study and maybe look at his courses. He says here, storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. So that's kind of what I want to focus on today. How can we put our amazing, incredible, grandiose ideas to change the world into actual actions through stories? So I want to focus on that as leaders, as change makers. How can we move the needle forward through storytelling and Susie through design? So I'll go on to the next slide, Suze. So when we think about stories, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So when we think about storytelling, why is storytelling so important? As we know, for over 27,000 years since the first cave paintings were discovered, telling stories has been one of the most fundamental ways to communicate with each other. So researchers have shown that our brains are hardwired to tell stories, but also to listen to stories. It's the universal way to communicate with each other. We're as social creatures, we're born to connect with each other and to empathize with each other through stories. Stories are a powerful way to connect with another person, maybe from a different view, maybe different from ourselves, and just again to empathize and put yourself in another person's shoes and another person's reality. I wanted to also add this second point here, moral imagination, that you see on the slide. I watched a TED Talk by Jacqueline Novogratz on inspiring a life of immersion, and I can share that link with you all at the end if you're interested. And she talked a lot about moral imagination in that TED Talk, which basically is putting yourself in someone else's shoes to lead from a place of purpose. So as leaders, again, we're here leading, we're here creating these awesome projects and initiatives to create a better future. How can we do that from a place of purpose and a place from our hearts, and actually lead again through moral imagination, through moral storytelling? So I want to kind of like frame this session through that lens. So keep that in your mind as we talk about storytelling today. So you can go on, Suze. Okay, so how do we use stories to power change? Now, I took these 7 powers of a great story from a workshop that I took with Richard Stone. He's also a storyteller, author, international speaker, and he has a great workshop on build your story intelligence. And he's also got a book, I think it's called Story Intelligence as well, that I can also share with you if you're interested. So he says that stories have a great story has 7 powers. Number 1 is the power to transport yourself or transport the listener. So the ability to take you to another place and another time. It allows us to enter into a different world and see the world through the character's experience. And this happens to me when I'm reading a book. I'm reading a great book, and all of a sudden I finish the book. I get really nostalgic and sad that I'm done with that journey. I don't know if you've all experienced that before, but that's that ability to transport you to another place. The second one is the power to communicate. So the ability to powerfully present a message. Most of us live in a different reality. And as soon as you start telling a story, it catalyzes your brain to mirror that other person's brain or that other person's reality. So that's the ability to powerfully communicate your message. And again, this can be that message of change that you want to share with the world. The third one is to enable learning. Stories allow us to learn something new, something maybe we've never heard of before. Number 4, to create meaning, especially when you're telling a story of the past to empower the future or to empower the present moment. Maybe you went through a difficult experience in the past and you weren't sure why that was happening to you. Well, now you can tell a story in the present moment around that experience and create meaning for that negative experience or that difficult experience. The 5th one is to transform. So the ability to tell a story in an active way to bring about change. Again, that story of change that we're yearning for to inspire behavioral change. The ability to unite in a world that we live in today that's so divided, so polarized, and so much going on around the world with many different topics and controversies. How can we use stories to again, empathize, to see the other side, to listen, to understand, and even if that person has a different point of view, they're still worthy of love, respect, and acceptance. So using stories to unite. And then the 7th one is to envision possibilities. So changing the narrative from maybe a negative situation that happened to you in the past and rewiring that narrative to something different, maybe recontextualizing that story or that experience that happened to you from a different angle. And that allows you to envision a different possibility, to see that story in a different way. So that's the ability to imagine, using your imagination. So now if we go into the next slide, every story has a particular structure that I want to share with you all today. And in the interest of time, I'm going to briefly go over these, and then I'll share a little example of my story, and then we'll do breakout sessions. So we won't go too deep into these, but you can take notes or take a screenshot of this. You can keep it with you. So again, this is kind of like the basic structure of storytelling, and these elements of a story on the left-hand side and the narrative schema. This has been used for centuries past from indigenous storytellers lot of the incredible legends and stories that have carried on from generation to generation in indigenous tribes use these techniques for their stories. So it's good to always know that every story has these basic elements. Number one is a voice. So what type of voice are you telling your story in? Is it suspenseful? Is it joyful, dramatic, sad? The characters are key elements in a story. Really important to really define those characters. We always want to know who the characters are in a movie or in a book that we're reading, because we want to go through that change with the character. Then there's always conflict. So some sort of complicating action. The plot is kind of like the overarching structure of that story. So what's going on, it helps tell how the story is unfolding. And then a resolution. So the resolution is the end where that complicating action comes to a resolution, the main problem is solved. If you look on the right-hand side, the narrative schema, this is, it kind of mirrors the elements of a story on the left-hand side, but it's the narrative schema is more so like how the story is being told and in what, like who's narrating it and what point of view is it coming from. So you'll always have an introduction. So a setting of characters of where you are, the place, an explanation of affairs. So what's going on, set the tone, explain the main events. You'll have an initial event, which is something that happens in your story that changes the direction of your story. And then an emotional response to that. We always want to introduce emotion here because we're emotional creatures, we're social creatures. And so we're moved by emotion. And then you'll have your complicating action. Again, it's that conflict that we see on the left-hand side. Always good to introduce that to maintain the engaged audience. You'll have an outcome. So how is that complicated action resolved? How, what's the resolution there? And the reactions to that outcome, again, using emotions here. Now, before I tell my story, I'm going to give you an example of the breakout session in a minute by telling a quick little story from my experience. But before I do that, I do want to share a little tip that will be useful for you too when you're learning and exercising and practicing storytelling. It's good to note that it's good to note to be able to master two sets of eyes. So this is something that I didn't know until I took this workshop with Richard Stone. But whenever you're storytelling, you want to master two sets of eyes. So one set of eyes is basically recalling your story that you're about to tell from the past, and then the other set of eyes is in the present moment telling the actual story. And you may not be the best or a master at both sets, but it's good to try and practice mastering both. So I'm not that great at telling the actual story. I'm better at recalling the story. But some tips to try and master both or to try and get better at both is just not memorizing your story, and try to just see your story in a series of pictures in your head. So sort of like signposts in your head to keep you on track with what you're about to say next. And you can, a lot of times I think about like comic books in this way, the little pictures in comic books. So that's kind of like a good way a good note to use when you're storytelling. Okay, so I want to pause here before I share my story and my example. Does anybody have any questions so far about what I've covered so far? Okay, feel free to add in the chat if you do. So I will tell a little story that happened to me recently this past week, and while I'm telling my story, try to see where I'm introducing these elements or some of the parts of the schema in my story, so that you can start to notice those introductions and then use them in your exercise when you get into your breakout rooms. Okay, so this past week, I was at the beach in northern Florida in the Gulf of Mexico with my family, celebrating my sister's 34th birthday. And when my family and I go to the beach, we're serious beach goers. We love staying out on the beach all day long, playing in the ocean, swimming, getting tan. But this particular trip was a little different. By the end of the second day, we all started noticing that everyone was coughing, like a lot. And even the dogs were coughing, and I had like bloodshot red eyes on the second day. I mean, we were just like, something's going on here. So we were wondering if there's something in the sand or maybe in the air that we're breathing. We were all weirded out. The next morning, like on the third day, my dad went out for a walk on the beach, and he walked about like 4 to 5 miles down the beach from our beach entrance. And he gets to a part at the beach where he sees like a red patch in the ocean. And he asks a local there what that was. And the local tells him that it's pine trees dyeing the ocean red. And so he comes back and tells us, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. What pine trees? Why are they dyeing that particular part red, and that only that place, only that patch red? So I thought it might be red tide. So I look up on the Florida Fish and Wildlife red tide current status in my area, in that area where we were. And sure enough, it was red tide. And so being an ocean advocate, I was really excited to share with my family what this phenomenon was. But I still had no idea if it had anything to do with like our coughing and our sneezing and my red eyes. So I went on to explain to them what red tide is. And it's basically this result of a microscopic algae bloom that turns the ocean like a reddish brownish tint. It's this algae species, particularly in Florida, the one that causes the most red tides in Florida is called Karenia brevis, and it brews up this like neurotoxin called brevetoxin, causing like depletion of oxygen in the area, in that little patch that it blooms in. So it kills any like marine life in the vicinity, all fish and marine mammals that swim around as well, because it also affects the nervous system of marine mammals and fish. And some common triggers from red tide are like warmer ocean temperatures, obviously, low salinity in the area, and also high nutrient content. So a lot of that runoff that we hear about, like from the fertilizers and pesticides used on agriculture and farms, it all runs after rainy days, runs into the ocean. Then we get that hot, humid summer days, and it just brews up this like algae neurotoxic bloom. So I explained this all to my family. And then while doing all that research, I find out that it actually seriously affects the human respiratory system as well. So that like explains all of the coughing and the scratchy throat and the sneezing that we were having. And so I found this so interesting, since we were like 5 miles away from that patch, but we were still coughing so much. So actually what happens is the wave action breaks up the algae, and that brevetoxin that I mentioned earlier starts like breaking up. And then whenever there's like wind that hits the water, that wind can like take those tiny droplets and you know, carry it miles inland. So that's what was happening with us. And so for some, the symptoms can fade away just by walking away to like a clear part of the air, but for others, it can stay a lot longer. And so like my sister. So after finding all this out, I told my family, okay, I really want to go see this patch. Like I'd never seen red tide in my life before. And I was really excited to go see it. And so my younger sister was like, oh, I want to come too. Not thinking twice that she's asthmatic. We go and we start to approach the red patch, and we start seeing like all of this like dead fish along the coast and dead crabs. And we get up to the patch, and there's like hundreds of seagulls just like posted up. And just obviously the water red and brown tint. And my sister starts getting like really, really bad. Like she starts getting really nauseous. She has to like, she's bending over like on her knees. Like she feels like she's about to throw up, coughing up a lot. And so we leave, and we're like, okay, this was not a good idea to bring you here. Obviously being asthmatic, we got her some medicine and she was okay. She ended up calming her asthma and her coughing. But on our last day there, my mom had booked like a photography session and for the family. And I was talking to the local photographer, and I was telling her about it. And she goes, oh, that's not red tide. That's the pine trees dyeing the ocean. But after seeing it, I obviously knew what it was red tide. And after seeing the Florida Fish and Wildlife map, I knew that it was in that area. So, and how it affected our respiratory system. So I was really shocked and realized that a lot of local people maybe not know what that is. And maybe there's a lot of lack of education around red tides. Something so serious to their area that probably happens numerous times a year. Even eating red tide contaminated shellfish can be really detrimental. So I felt sad about this lack of education, but also inspired to use my voice and write and my writing to raise awareness around what this is and what we're putting into our air and into our food and agriculture, and how that can eventually end up in our ocean and back to us through our respiratory ways or through on our plates. So that's my story of change that I wanted to share with you all, and how I want to use this personal experience to raise more awareness about this phenomena and help people understand what this actually is. So that's my story. So if you paid attention to that slide, you could see some of those areas where I introduced the narrative schema and some of those basic elements. And now I would love for Anna to help me put you all into breakout rooms. And I don't know how many we have here in the actual group, but Anna, it can be random. And I was thinking maybe like 2 to 3 people. Perfect. How many people do we have?
Um,
We have
we have around
15.
10. Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, without, yeah.
Without us, we have, I think, around 10. So I think we can
Okay.
put around 2 in a group. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 would be
Okay.
perfect. And we could take like 5 minutes. And basically what I want you all to do, I'll leave the slide up, or Susie will leave the slide up for that, the elements. And think about a story of change that you want to introduce to your partner or to your group, and something that happened to you in your past, some personal experience that you really felt moved and passionate about, and share that story with them. It could be like a 3-minute story. And yeah, try to make it around 2 to 3 minutes, since we'll have 5 minutes in this session, and try to introduce those elements that I talked about. So this is just a good way to practice your storytelling skills. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Sorry, just really quickly. Would you like me to put you in breakout rooms as well? Would you like to join the breakout room?
Yeah, we can stay in your, well, I guess if you want to, yeah, we can.
Okay, that maybe we can do some with 3 people, and you can be like the third person. And if you want to come back to the main session, you can do so.
Okay.
That'd be okay?
Yeah.
Let me just assign this. Okay. You should get a notification. And Christine, how long would you like me to keep the breakout rooms open? Oh, I think she froze.
I think she ended up in the other room.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so we'll be back in a couple of minutes. I'll call you back to the main room in a few minutes.
Do we have to set a reminder for how many minutes we want?
Yeah, anything between 3 to 5 minutes is perfect. And so
Okay.
I don't know if there's a way to do like a
I'll just let me there's a way to do a broadcast message, so I'll probably just put a broadcast message saying that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Swati. So we are currently doing an activity where everyone's working together on a story of change. So we are working in breakout rooms. Would you like for me to move you to a breakout room for you to be a part of it? Or I'm not sure if you can hear me. Hi, Tony.
We have everything back. Okay. So does anybody want to share? Just maybe we'll take like 2 minutes before we head over to Susie's design session. Does anybody want to share anything interesting or particular, or something you noticed while you were telling your story or when you were listening to this other story?
May I?
Yes, please go ahead.
I noticed that, and I think that changed a little bit more from our exercise yours, is that you focus a lot on the complication. Is it that way supposed to be? Like everything is really, really going bad, and then the outcome comes. So is the complication the thing that makes it interesting, or is more the emotional? What is the step that we need to focus more so that we grab more the people?
That's a good question. I think it really, every story is unique in its own way, and especially from the person telling it. So the complicating action is for sure important to be able to engage that, like the audience and what happened and what's the conflict, but it doesn't have to be necessarily focused only on that. A lot of times stories can focus a lot on the characters too, like the essence of the character. Who were they? Who are they? What change are they going through? Even like the resolution can be like really hyper focused on that as well. So as long as you're introducing, a little bit of all of the elements, that story starts to unfold in a really great, engaging way.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything interesting they want to share from their breakout room?
Would like to ask you that how to make sure that you put everything which is very, very integral to that story and a kind of time bound activity. What's the best timing for a story? Means how, I don't think so people beyond 5 minutes will be able to get connected with you. After 5 minutes, maybe the attention span will not be that much. Is it true?
Yeah, that's another good question. So when you're listening to stories, like, obviously when you're watching a movie or reading a book, that's going to be a very longer type of long form story. So it depends on what type of story you're referencing to. But when you're speaking or when you're telling a story with a friend or, a small group of audience, it's good to keep it sort of short and not elaborate so much on all of the little details, because you're right, you will kind of lose the person if you're not really getting to that next element, So I would say anywhere between between 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even shorter, 3 to 5 minutes. So try to really make it that not so in depth with every little detail. I noticed with Anna, you did a good job with that, where you shared your dad's story and the dentist and this cruise that they took, and she was good about like introducing each of the elements, but in a quick, short of way, but also very descriptive, so that we still were able to get the picture and imagine us being there. So she mentioned the complicating action with her father's tooth, and then visiting this dentist in a tiny little town in Mexico, and that they were the ones who were able to fix the tooth. So she was able to like descriptively share each of those elements, but not go down the rabbit hole and lose us in that way. So I think, yeah, good question. Anything beyond like 10 minutes might be a little long when you're sharing one story with an audience. But if you're sharing multiple stories and maybe they interact and weave within each other, it can also be longer. It's just good to always like try to see how you can introduce the next thing or what's coming next as you're building off of, the character or the conflict or the plot. I hope I answered your question okay. Anyone else before we move on to Susie?
I have another question.
Sure.
So I don't know if it's useful or not, but people that normally try to make others laugh, they tend to say a story and then something, in order to explain a detail, they move to a second story and then come back. Is that useful? Is not useful? I know it's a resource when to make people laugh, but to take a story for environment, climate action or something, is it useful, or you lose people? What?
So you're saying when you're telling a story and then to introduce some humor, you kind of side into another story and then come back to the other one?
Yeah, well, that's the resource they use. But for example, I'm talking about selling a car, and then and one day I used my car, and my wife came up and sit up in the same car, and we just drive and crash and everything. So that's why we decided to change to another car, and that's how I knew I was doing good by selling. It's a fake story, of course. But the thing is, telling these two stories: the selling by selling the car or buying car, and then moving into another story about driving with the Wi-Fi crash, and yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I think it's definitely useful as long as, again, you're making it flow. I think the hard thing for me a lot of times what I'm telling is that flow part, like making sure it's flowing and you're kind of introducing all of the elements in a weaving type of way. So it not being like some random thing and then you're losing the person or confusing them. So yeah, I think for sure that's very useful, and just making sure that it flows and that it's actually connected to what you're actually saying, and that you go back to that initial message that you want to share, then for sure, I think it's definitely useful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good question, Kevin. Okay, so we'll go on to Susie now. Susie, I can share my screen so that you can focus on your slides. And I can share any of the links or the references, people that I spoke about in the chat afterwards, or with Anna, however you all want to do that. Okay. So let me share screen here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes,
okay.
We can see it.
Present and go ahead, Susie.
Okay, so now that we have our stories, I want to walk you through some ways that you can bring that message to life using design. You can go to the next slide, Christine. All right, so there's some pretty powerful stats that showcase the power of visuals. It's said that 90% of your, or we process about 90% of visuals in our brain. And also even more, 80% of people remember what they see compared to 10% of what they hear and 20% of what they read. And so it's just a case for how powerful design can be. And then before you begin designing, it's really important to understand who your message is for. For example, a poster that's intended for children about climate change will have a different look and feel as opposed to a poster that's the same poster on climate change that's going to be posted at a music venue or something like that. It's also important to understand your constraints and mediums. And so is this going on social media? Is it a graphic for social media? Are you doing a printed flyer? Where is this going? And then the things that the things that I'll talk on are just color, typography, and imagery that'll just help your design be more impactful. And you can go to the next slide, Christine. All right, so color theory is both the science and the art of understanding color. And we can use this color. So this is a color wheel right here, and we can use that to determine which colors pair well together and also determine harmony between colors. You can go to the next slide. Without getting too deep into the color wheel, you'll see here that it's broken down into, this color wheel specifically is broken down into primary, which is your red, yellow, and blue, and then secondary and tertiary colors. So when you mix them all together. And then you can also split them into the color wheel into cool and warm tones, or cool and warm colors. And typically warm colors represent brightness, action, energy, and where cool tones are more calm, trusting, and like green is a way to represent growth or renewal. Okay, go ahead. All right, so color schemes are a useful way to create harmony between colors based on the geometric relationship represented on the color wheel. So here I'm showing 3 different examples, although there are a few different, there's more than this, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to go through 3. You have complementary, which is when 2 colors are on the opposite end of the wheel, right across from each other. And then you have analogous, which is 3 to 5 colors that are side by side on the wheel. And then you also have triadic, which is 3 different colors that are equally across from each other, creating a triangle. Okay, and you can go to the next slide. So here you have a complementary color scheme. And if you go ahead and click on the next slide, Christine, you'll see that the orange and the blue are the ones right across from each other in this image. And also, just like a fun nerd fact, nature has a really great way of showcasing all different types of color schemes. And so, yeah, it's just really, nature is just harmonious, inherently harmonious. So go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so here you have the analogous color scheme, and you see if you just click on the thing, click on it, Christine, you can see that we have all the all the blues and greens and like variations of blues and greens. So that's a analogous color scheme. And then here's a triadic color scheme. So this one is a little bit more challenging, I guess, to accomplish, but you have the purples and the greens and then the oranges and the pumpkins to create that harmony between the colors. Okay, and you can go to the next slide. All right, so much like color, typography can be used to evoke emotion and grab people's attention as well. For example, on the top left here, you have a bold typeface, which is also black and bold. So it's pretty much like the sign itself is capturing your attention right away, and the type is capturing your attention. Whereas on the bottom right, you have a combination of colors and playful type. And so these are made for 2 different audiences. The one on the bottom is actually a screenshot from I think like a brand that's intended for kids, and it's a little bit more playful. And so these are just different ways that people use type and colors to convey their message. We have different font types. So fonts can be categorized into 5 different types that are shown here. We have serifs, sans serifs, scripts, slab serifs, and display fonts. And the typography that you use depends on the emotional impact you want to create and how you want the design to connect with your audience. So for example, you have a class. So serif fonts are typically considered more classic, more professional. You see it a lot in like books and in old text. And then where you have sans serifs are different. They're a little bit more clean, modern, forward thinking. And yeah, so go ahead. And then hierarchy. So hierarchy is a way to just like organize your text and help the reader scan through content. You can do this. This also like draws attention to specific words in your design, and you can create visual hierarchy in different ways using sizes, weights, like sizes and weights of text, but also different fonts. And so for example, in this image here, you have the heading is bolder and larger in size. The subheading is a little bit smaller, but there's a contrast between the two. And then you have the paragraph, which is a little bit smaller and so that's not the main focus of the information that's being presented. Oh, okay. So I have a good question about how you know the font is a serif, sans serif, and etc. And I can actually, do you want to go back to the slide really quick, Christine? So most of the time it'll tell you on, you can even look up serifs, sans serif examples, and you'll have like different combinations. Typically with a serif, so for serifs and sans serifs in general, you see that one of the big telltale signs of serifs is that it has legs, like little legs on the bottom, whereas serifs, sans serifs have legs, sans serifs do not have legs. And so that's a huge differentiating factor between the two. And then a slab serif is just like a variation of a serif, which is a little bit more bold and expressive. And then honestly, like display fonts, you can go in every which way. It's just more of that quirky, decorative type of vibe. And so it really just depends like what you're trying to convey versus like trying to pick, I guess, the most perfect font. Or that'll help you determine which font to choose. And then I guess you can go back to, okay, so here's just a few more notes on essentially just to make your design a little bit more impactful. So you have legibility. If you can see on the bottom here, this script that I specifically used is really hard to read, especially as the text gets longer. Whereas you can pick a different type of script font to represent your heading, and then you have the smaller or the more the longer text that's represented in a sans serif. And sans serifs are really good for reading along with serifs. I would say probably don't use a decorative font or script font when you're trying to write a lot of information. The other thing is that you want to make sure that you have a negative space. So space around the text that you're trying to write, even space around the imagery or the colors. And then this one is specific for our environmental field, is to find, oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'll talk about contrast a little bit. So here in this one, you see that the contrast between the text and the background is really, it's not as strong. And so it's hard to read what it's saying in comparison to when I put the white contrast with the orange here. And then, oh yeah, and so what I was gonna say is in our field specifically, I think there's a way to find a balance between having like really alarming graphics or colors, and then also being overly optimistic. A lot of the times we see, environmental is, climate change is real, it's happening, but it's also, sometimes people don't know what to do with the information that you're giving them, or don't know how to react. And it just becomes so alarming that they just like tune out right away. And so finding that balance can be tricky. And then also it just doesn't have to look like everything else. You can get really creative with what you're trying to do, depending on your audience and the colors that you pick. So you just play with it and see what comes out of your design. And the last thing I want to, before I jump into Canva, is just talk about a couple of resources, and y'all can screenshot this as well. But essentially, there's different design tools. I like to use Adobe Creative Cloud, and then also Adobe Color and Canva. So Canva is a free tool. And then we have options for fonts, and then photography. So if you don't have photography for your graphics, you can, these two on the Pexels and Unsplash are free versions, and then Stocksy is a paid version. And so does anyone have any questions? Oh. Yeah, Adobe Spark is really good too. I agree.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Sometimes when I'm creating designs, I have a hard time combining different fonts and finding the right balance between it looking very crowded and messy and it looking, like here where you have, hello, we are a studio, the combination of the fonts looks really nice. And for some reason, I can never achieve that. So I was thinking, I was hoping there's are there any tips or advice on how to combine fonts?
Yeah, sure. So a good rule of thumb, and when I first started designing, I would go with a serif and a sans serif. And typically you can even go with like a bold one of either one, and then do the one opposite. And so that creates a nice contrast between the two. And then the other thing you can do, so there's font families. And in a font family, they've already created some type of visual hierarchy. And so you can even just stick to one and go with that. And so, for example, I'm trying to think of one at the top of my head, like Playfair Display is a serif that has so many different variations. And so you can just start playing with that. And that already that already feels like there's enough contrast, but it creates a lot of harmony between the text that you're writing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I want to go ahead and just go to Canva and show you all a really great tool. So Canva is a really great tool. Oh, maybe I have to screen share, right? 1 sec. Okay. Let me put this on the side. Okay, so Canva is a really great tool that you can use, and there's a free version and also like a paid version that gives you more variety. But we're gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna recreate this poster here. And so we went around and talked about Christine's story, you know, the one with the red tide. And so we've decided that we're gonna create a poster that can go in different restaurants across in that coastal town. And some of the things that we want to highlight is what red tide is, like what's happening, what, you know, why it's happening, what are things that you need to avoid because it's a restaurant. So we want to make sure that we're talking about the health benefits, and then just also a way to get involved so that people don't just read this information. They're like, oh no, what do I do? And so Christine provided this image, but you can also find images, let me see, through Unsplash. And so Unsplash and also Pexels, if you type in either what you're looking for, so for example, the ocean, it'll give you some images that you can go with. And then also you can even go with like an emotional, like let's say happy. And it'll give you like different options for people that are happy and things like that. So there's different ways to grab images from this thing. And then I think there's a question. Yes, yeah, Canva does offer free images for everything. So yeah, I'll go through that and show you how you can go off a template, or also just in this case, I've just created this just based on the conversation. And so or based on the story. Okay, so we have our images, and now I want to create a color palette from those images, which sometimes it's, is there a question? Oh,
yes,
I think
we have
Ivan's
hand up.
Ivan has raised
yeah, go ahead.
Hand. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have this question: when one is using an image from the internet, should we cite it in the, well, wherever we are using it? Like you just put, let's say you put some image which is even free without copyright. Where do you put that? Like this citation?
If you're using an image that's free, typically like and usually like it'll say, so for example, in Unsplash, they're free commercial images. And so adding like crediting the person or crediting the artist is really nice to do. But it's also like they put those up there for the intention of you being able to use them for free. And so I think in that case, it can be up to you if the image is already licensed for free use and it's a commercial photo. But whenever you're using, so I try to stray away from using other people's work unless I've paid for it or I've asked for permission. And typically, if it's a commercial thing, you know, providing some type of monetary value is a good standard, because, you know, people work hard photographers are artists. And so, yeah, there's options, and Stocksy also has the paid versions as well that you can use. So, just like on that same note, Pinterest, like, I would say just be careful in general to not grab things from Pinterest, because they're from everywhere. And, you know, some artists don't really like that you share their work without even asking, or even, you know, put it in things. So just a couple like different rules of thumb.
But you can, yeah, Ivan, your question about like, where do you put it? you can put it like right under the image, right?
Yeah.
Susie, say like image by or photography by and like small font.
Yeah.
Okay, and about when you, let's say I go out and take a picture of a plaza, right? And there's a crowd in there, but I know that now it is pretty much like illegal to use someone's image in this kind of thing. So either you blurry the faces and then the picture loses its like appeal, or I don't know, that kind of pictures should be avoided.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in general, like if you're going somewhere and taking a photo, like if you're so I'd say like and I'm also not a photographer, but I think that one of the things about photography is that there's an art in it. And so people are trying to convey a message. And so like I was showing you, when you say happy picture, like typically there's not always going to be the right emotion that you want to pick up from like just taking random pictures of people. And so I would just recommend that you look up images that are already free. To display that type of emotion that you want. And then, just avoid, I guess, having to use someone's face. I think, yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, I've never run into that issue because we don't use a lot of faces. And when we do, we'll just grab them from the commercial.
But Ivan, I think that if you're taking a picture of like a plaza and the images of the faces are kind of like far away and blurred already as it is, it's okay to use. If it's like up in front of somebody's face that maybe you don't know, yeah, maybe avoid that. But I think a far away picture and somebody's face happens to be in it is okay, as long as it's kind of already blurred, right, Suze?
I don't know. I don't know if someone is would be comfortable if they saw that image, or also like depends on the scope of the project. I think if it was like a smaller project and it didn't get that much visibility, but I can imagine if it was like a large project, somebody might be like, hey, I didn't get, yeah. So I think maybe ask for permission is a good rule of thumb. Okay, so where was I on this thing? Okay, so when you're in Canva, this is like the main home screen, and somebody mentioned here, which is something that I love about Canva. Oh, look, it says copyright images will be blocked if we put them on social media platforms. Okay, that's good to know. When you're in Canva, you'll come, this is the main thing. And right here on the right, you'll see that there's an option for templates, and you can pick based off of, presentations or, anything that you want, social media graphics. And it's really nice because it already has the size for you. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my little red tide poster. All right, so here I created a couple different things. As I mentioned, Christine was gracious enough to give me these photos when she went on her trip. And so what I did in order to create this, so here we have like a color blocking thing. What I did is I used this handy trick, color from Adobe. And what it does is you drop your photo in here and you can extract a theme. And these themes can be used when you design. So it's really nice. It's a really nice tool if you're also like not too familiar with, color theory and how to mix colors together. And then it gives you the hex code, which is down on the bottom, that you can just click on and it'll copy it onto your design. And so I don't know that we'll have time to like recreate this entire thing, but I just want to show you like different ways that you can, make this come to life. And so I started with the images, and then I decided that I wanted the color blocking. And so like I was saying before, I wanted their specific text, and it's always good to know what type of content is going into your design before you get started. And then I wanted it to be, I wanted this to be the most important part of the flyer. And so if you notice, like on the flyer itself, you see that there's different variations of this text, but this text is also a lot more obvious than also because it's small, but it's a lot more prominent than the other text. And so automatically your eye is going to, these texts to see what you want to read first. And then, all right, so let me just show you. Let's just say that I wanted to insert a text box. I would go to the left here and I would just add a heading. And here you can add the heading, and then I'll just say that it says the same thing as this one. Okay, so here we have the heading, and I wanted to say red tide making waves along the Florida coast. Excuse me. And then I picked this font, the Yellowtail. And so there it is. It's kind of small, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Like I said, I wanted this to be a little bit more prominent. So I'm using the sizing up here. And then I want it to move to the left. So here's the alignment, and you can have it go to the left so that it's aligned with this bottom text here. And so that way you're reading, and then I'm going to change this color. So you want to change it through the A here. And these, once you start putting colors into here with the hex codes, it'll start to, it'll put them on here for you. And so now all I have to do is just click on it and it'll change the color for me. And so that's kind of how you play with the text. I used a totally different text on the bottom here. And I honestly, like, sometimes I just look at, different options. And so I'll just look at it to see what it looks like until I'm like, okay, that looks really good. That they're not competing, with each other. And it's still pretty easy to read. And then with this like text box here, so I wanted to create a block. What I did was I went to elements on the left side here. I put this box in there, and then, just dragged it to where I wanted it, and then just used the sides to create, to fit it into the space that I wanted. And then I can change the color using this top here again to change it back to the color that it was. In elements, you have a lot of different options. So we have like the circle here as well. That's where I got it from the elements. And then one of the big things, because it is going in a restaurant, I wanted it to be important. I wanted it to showcase that, one of the things was to harm the health of humans. And so here we're doing the shellfish. And so in elements, I just put shellfish. And here it is. And I just popped it in, and you can change the color as well if you just click on the top left color button right there. And so let me see if there was, one other thing. So when you're adding the hex codes into here, so let's say I grabbed this, I'm gonna pick a different one because I think that some of these are already in there. So let's just say I grab this hex code here. So I'm copying it onto my clipboard by clicking this little section. And then I want to change this back box here. So I go here, and then I just add the hex code, and it'll say, oh, that's what it's reading. And so I'll just click on it, and it changes the color for you based on the hex code. And so I do not want it to look like that. So I'll just press Command Z and leave it the way it is. But yeah, essentially, those are, I know that was like a really brief way to explain. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. Christine, can you think of other?
And then you can just show like how you download it and save it.
Yeah.
Download it as an image or a PDF. It has various options.
Okay, so that's perfect. Thank you. I forgot about that. So These are images that on the left here that I've already uploaded into here. And like I said, I grabbed a few from even for the presentation through Unsplash. And then here, you can add them in by simply just clicking on them, or you can also hold it down and drop it. And so that'll actually orient your image to exactly where you want it to go. And then if you double click on it, you can shift it around and move it around to see what part you want of the image. The other option is if you go to Elements, Elements also has images and videos. So I actually saw this really cool video, and this is going to be printed. So the video, well, not technically, but like hypothetically, it would be printed, so video wouldn't work. But when I Googled red tide in Canva, it actually had some really cool videos. And so if this was going, like, let's say on social media or something, you can always swap this for a video, and you see it's showing you, like, it's just creating like visual interest here, and bringing people's attention to the top of the screen. And then you can also do the same thing where you drag it over and shift it around to see what you want it to showcase. So yeah, I think that's, the other, so I know this is like, you know, a little bit more advanced because actually I created this yesterday because I needed some time to think about it. But you can also, in the template option, it gives you different options, and I'll just add a page down here to start from. And so if you wanted to start from like a poster or something that's already existed, you can just add the template and then just shift things around. If you know, like you were saying, Anna, about like font pairing and things like that. And you can even take some of the fonts that they already have to add them to the design that you have. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
I think we have a question here in the chat by Edgar, who says, this flyer is using triadic color correspondence?
I think, let me look, because I know that the red and the blue, so let's see. We can double check. So red and blue, and then it has like, so yeah, you can consider it to be triadic because it's using like a beige-ish yellow and like a yellow tone there. And so, yeah, good job. And yes, it actually is. I like premium, especially if you're doing a lot of design. I think it gives you a lot more options, especially with the photos, and it gives you the option to also upload your own fonts as well, which is really nice. Yeah, so it depends. I think because we like use it, we also use it for our clients, and so we'll use the pro account more often. And I honestly, like, I don't know all the differences between the pro and a free account. I think it's just like limited, right? Like in the images, and just like small little little weird nuances that it does.
Yeah, like the colors, you have to re-upload them every time, whereas premium saved, and they save your fonts for you too. And also in premium, you can have more options for fonts, whereas in the free version, a lot of times I'm like, oh, this font isn't available. So it depends on if you're making a lot of art and graphics and social media things, then it might be worth it. But if it's just something you use every now and then, I think it's okay to use the free one.
Yeah, and I think it's something like $12 a month, $13.
Someone, Edgar asked, what was the negative space again?
Yeah, so negative space is like the space that you leave. I'm sorry, excuse me. The space that you leave between imagery, text. And so One of the things that I wish I had a really good example of what it's like to not have negative space, but essentially, like, let's just say, I'll just do this just to show you. Let's say like I wrote all of that and then I had it kind of coming in here, going over. That might be a little bit hard for people to read. And so I'm wanting to, when I'm creating it, I'm wanting to create like some space or some room for my design to breathe. And so you kind of just like want, when what I like to do is I like to look, like reread everything and, just kind of look at it as if I was just like somebody reading it and see how my eye moves towards like between the design and the words. And so there are like anything, even with negative space, like you can make the people, once you know all the rules, you can easily break all the rules. And so this is just one of those like good rule of thumbs to keep the area around it, clean and even just aligned too. Yeah. I had an example on the slide, and this one I can show you again. So this one doesn't have much space, and I mean, even here, like let's say for example it was a logo and your logo is just like all the way to the end. Sometimes it's really hard it just doesn't look as professional or as clean. And sometimes like, yeah, so it'll create a much more busy design, or like, I don't know, much more busy. It's probably not the way to say a busier design. Okay, I'm gonna, let's see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna stop share. Oh, Christine, actually, I think you were sharing, but or was I sharing?
You were.
Okay, let me just actually share again.
Thank you. I know we're over time, so thanks for
your
patience here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for hanging out with us.
Yes. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us here. You can join our newsletter and follow us on social media. And then Anna, should I include some of the references in the chat, or should I email them to you?
If you want, you can email them to me, and I can email them to all the participants so they can have it saved in their email.
Perfect. Okay. Just some of the people I talked about, and then
Susie, perfect.
You can send it to me as well. Thank you, everybody. Anybody have any questions?
Any final questions before we finish? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Christine and Susie. This session has been so great and insightful. I learned a lot, both from storytelling and from design. So we really appreciate it, and we will stay in touch, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye. And thank you to all the participants who were here with us today. We will have a session next week, and we will email information on that as well. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.